All right, go ahead, guys.
No.
Okay, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Design Review Subcommittee for May 26th to order. We have our three commissioners here present and the applicants, so this is very good. We have item 1 is minutes from the May 12th, 2021 meeting. Do we have any corrections or a motion?
I don't have any correction.
Michael?
No correction.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I move
I'll make the motion.
approve the
Okay, motion by Blackwell. Do we have a second?
second.
Second by Wu. We'll count for the vote. Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell,
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall also votes aye, so passes 3-0. We have one item on the agenda under architectural review. It's the cultural heritage permit 2378 and minor exception permit 21003, 1011 Buena Vista, Ashabi edition. And Katie is the staff presenting it tonight. So Katie, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I do have a presentation this afternoon. This is the second review of the subject project, the Ashabi addition. Next slide. The project is a remodel and addition of an existing multifamily residence within 300 feet of a historic structure, and it's on the coastal bluff. This includes a minor exception permit request for a garage encroachment into the front setback and an extension of an existing 6-foot wall within the front setback. Next slide. You can see the project here. The project is currently non-conforming with regard to the rear setback from the coastal bluff, the south side setback, the number of parking spaces, and the location of the garage, which is approximately 4 feet from the front property line. Next slide. So in the prior DRSC review, the main concern from the DRSC was that this would qualify as a major remodel per the Coastal Commission, and that, and also that the garage relocation was not consistent with code allowances for in-the-bank garages. Another comment was that the balance and scale of the garage front facade was a little bit off. And then more minorly, that the trees in the front setback be modified and additional aesthetic improvements be made in the driveway by adding turf block so that it just helps to improve the aesthetic since it's so dominated by the garages. The applicant has addressed the more minor concerns. They did add the turf block and specified a small palm species that the planter can accommodate. Staff does recommend that a second tree be added to the front setback to comply with code requirements. Next slide. So in the report, staff made the recommendation that the garage be detached from the primary structure so that the project would not exceed the 50% addition threshold for non-conforming structures, particularly under coastal. It should be noted that the applicant did make that change and address this issue by detaching the structures, as can be seen clearly in the south elevation and also on sheet A401, which I've kind of just provided a little snippet of here. Well, as you can see from the roof plan, the roof of the residential structure does overhang to the garage, but it's not attached. Therefore, the first staff recommendation in the report is not applicable. They are really close to that threshold for a major remodel, but with that detachment, with that offset of the roofs, it doesn't look like it would exceed those thresholds. I contacted Coastal Commission, and of course, they wanted to do a complete review before they decided. But I did double check the definition in our LUP and double checked all the calculations that the applicant provided. So they do look like they're good on that. Next slide. So one of the DRSC's other primary concerns was that the balance at the front elevation was off. The applicant modified the windows and the doors. You can see the old perspective that was previously reviewed on the top, and the new current proposal is on the bottom. So just so you can kind of see the changes that they made in response to the DRSC comments. So they did remove those windows on the one side of the garage. They made the header the same across both garages and used the same type of panel door. The one door is a little bit taller than the other, but it either has to be even at the top and not the bottom, or they have to be the same size but offset. So I do think the applicant addressed that in a pretty simple and elegant way. And the grade change just requires that the doors be a slightly different size. Next slide. So finally, the DRSC previously discussed the desirability of moving the garage back from the front property line from an aesthetic standpoint. So you can see the current condition here. As I said, the garage is set back about 4 feet from the property line, and then there's about a 10-foot, I think, right of way there you can see. And then at the bottom is the elevation that they are proposing. But the DRSC did question the merits of the minor exception permit requested for the garage encroachment into the front setback. So even though the applicant is requesting to move the garage back into a more conforming location per the setbacks, it would need this MEP to still encroach, and they would be basically demolishing and rebuilding that structure in order to move it back. So the applicant did provide responses to comment to those comments addressing this concern, and they provided several cross sections in support, and you'll find those on sheet C-002 of your plans. Next slide. They also provided this exhibit. They demonstrate that by moving the garage back, which is is what you see in black, and then the red is what you see currently out at the site. The point here is that it does improve a less than ideal existing condition where cars are already parked blocking the sidewalk and sometimes into the street, which you'll also see in just a minute. And because each of the garage doors is individual, they're very narrow, and it's difficult for a larger vehicle to get in and realistically get in and out of the vehicle. So those garages, the applicant represents that they're underutilized. So on the next slide, there is a video that the applicant wanted to show the planning commissioners. This is just showing the current condition, which doesn't necessarily comply, but it does reflect what occurs not just on this property, but up and down this section of the street where there are several garages that are very close to the front property lines, like the condition here. So people are walking out in the street. So the applicant, by moving it back, is asserting that it'll improve this existing not ideal condition. Next slide. So here are the numbers. We took a good look at it. So on their cross section where they're showing the 10.33 foot rise, which is what's required within the first 30 feet in order to qualify for the setback that they're requesting. As you can see, that top of curb measurement is circled in yellow, and it's kind of off to, we'll call it the north side of the property. Doesn't actually abut the front of the property. And that's, from what I gathered, the basis of the design review subcommittee's concern. So then when you actually move, I didn't do that math right. When you move into the property, That should actually be 8 point something in the orange. It's below that 10-foot threshold from 108.68 feet in elevation to 117.28 feet in elevation. And as you move down south, the red, it's a 7-foot rise. The blue is about a 5-foot rise. And then all the way down to the green is a 3-foot rise. So averaging all the points, it's about a 6 or 7 foot average. The code is not super clear on this. The exact wording says if the existing natural grade on the lot has a rise or fall in excess of 10 feet as measured from the elevations at the established top of curb, then that you can qualify for these different encroachments. So the applicant is basically asserting that there is that rise does exist on the street at this property. Staff did look back at previous approvals that had been approved for these MEPs by the Planning Commission or the zoning administrator. And the way it had previously been interpreted in what I researched was that the 10-foot rise should be in the actual location of the garage. And sometimes it looks like maybe we used a bit of an average, but it was, at the lowest point of the garage and the highest point of the garage, not the lot. But the code doesn't actually specify. So based on the DRSC's feedback and the previous approvals that the city has granted for this, staff does recommend that the applicant leave the garage where it is because it doesn't look like it meets the standard in the way that we've previously interpreted it. I would point out that then there's not really a lot of room for a turf block there because engineering is going to require them to put in the accessible walkway. And depending on how that's constructed, probably there isn't really going to be room for turf block there since they do only have 4 feet from the right of way to the garage. So let's see, next slide. Yeah, so staff's remaining recommendations are numbers 2 and 3 from your report. Really minorly adding the 1 additional tree in the front yard setback. And also to keep the garage in the current location since it doesn't appear to meet the city's previous interpretations of this code section. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And the applicant and their team are here and can also speak to this as well.
Thank you, Katie. Does any of the commissioners have questions for Katie's presentation? Well, I hear none.
I'm sorry,
Katie?
Bart.
Oh,
I beg your pardon, Bart. I was on mute.
okay,
I was
Michael,
talking
you have
away.
the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. So Katie, your recommendation is that the applicant does not touch the garage structure, right? That's what you said.
Right, they don't touch the structure. They would still be able to do whatever facade updates that they want to do to match the updates on the rest of the project.
And I would agree with that only because we are the DRSC and there's a kind of a gray area with design elements, right? When we start delving into some land use issues that would probably be heard by others later. Okay, I just want to be clear on that. It wasn't just the ramp; it'd be other requirements, right? That we'd be forced to deal with if we're going to make a substantial change to that structure, like parking, etc.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Commissioner Blackwell.
So if we're going to modify this structure, right, and the applicant is still, insisting on parking in front of that garage, which we wouldn't support, from a land use perspective, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be something that the city would support, only because there'd still be encroachment, and it probably wouldn't be ideal. So, I mean, it's like we're looking at a design that wouldn't conform anyway, and we're supporting, in essence, we'd be supporting something that is in violation to our own code.
Yeah, so there's kind of some competing goals here, which the design review subcommittee hit on the last time we reviewed this, and that's that. Of course, we want this to be moved back in terms of how it looks, because it is very dominant on the street front, and these improvements would lessen that effect. As the applicant had pointed out in their response to the comments, there's already a parking issue here. What I understand from engineering is that likely the sheriff cannot enforce that as far as hanging over the sidewalk, because there is not continuous sidewalk on the whole block yet. There could be in the future. And so in the future, the sheriff could write tickets if cars are parked there and encroaching into the accessible pathway.
Yes.
But either way, whether we leave it where it is or whether it gets pushed back, engineering is going to be recommending a condition of approval that then punts that issue to code compliance, so that whether the sidewalk exists on the whole block or not is a moot point. And that way, if it continues to be an issue, either as it currently exists, or if they were to modify it, if the planning commission were to grant that exception, you wouldn't really be able to park anything on the driveways, unless it's, a smart car or a motorcycle or something like that.
Okay. That's good. Thank you. So, but we could still talk about the design, other portions of the project today. So, and if the applicant wants to maintain the current design, that would just be the risk the applicant would take. Yeah. Okay. That's all I have, Bart.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Jan, I'd like to say something here, maybe to expedite things, and if you can chime in and either agree or disagree, I'd be more than happy to do it. We've got a.
Well, I don't have it.
Well, what I wanted to say is the discussion about moving the garage, the slopes, and so forth are local ordinances. I think we have a much bigger issue here by the fact we need to approve this project for ADA compliance. ADA compliance is a federal law. It is enforced by the courts, not by any jurisdiction. California helps people do compliance, but the courts ultimately decide. And I firmly believe that looking at this, if we make a decision to move the garage, our only choice to comply with the federal law is to move it back the full amount. Anything in between is not complying with the federal ADA laws and puts both the city and the applicant at risk of lawsuit by an individual. It wouldn't necessarily have to be charged by the jurisdiction or anything. Any public citizen who wants to say something didn't comply with ADA standards has that opportunity. And I think as a reviewing body, our two choices are, you've got the existing garage location. It is grandfathered in. You don't have to do anything to it by any ordinance or any means. So I feel it's either we leave it or it moves back the full amount. And these discussions are kind of interesting discussions, but are not the biggest issue. What do you think on that statement, Shen?
Well, but I think we're in question stage. Are we? I do have some comment, but unless we're in a
The question
discussion.
is, my question was really for Katie and the applicant, is do they want to put the city at risk and themselves at risk of potential lawsuit on a federal law?
Well, that's why engineering would be recommending that we would add in the condition of approval that they're recommending that any parking that blocks that accessible pathway would be subject to code compliance enforcement, because clearly we already have that issue here. So I'm certainly not a lawyer. I don't know what sort of exposure that would give the city either way. But engineering does want to cover it with that condition, even if it stays as is.
Okay, very good. Jen, you have the floor.
Can you hear me, Bart?
Yes, I can.
Are we in discussion?
Not in discussion yet. This is questions for the applicant and the staff.
No, I don't have any question at this moment.
Okay, very good. Let's give the applicant an opportunity. We did receive your narrative on your desires of how you wanted to approach this, and we've read it. So you have the floor to speak.
Thank you. The whole reason for this is the existing garages are not usable, and that's why everybody parks outside. They are narrow, and you can't really get in them, and that's the only reason they park. I would like, I would like to park inside the garage. I like to park my car inside, and I just want to make it something that you can park your cars in there. And we cannot do it at the existing condition. But there is no way we can move more than 8 feet. We're proposing to move the garages back 8 feet because that's as far as we can go while maintaining 3 feet separation, 3 foot 7 inches separation between the existing, the unit, the building and the garages. So we don't attach them. And that's maximum we can move. We are bound by that dimension. If I had more room, I would move it back. But this will make a better driveway. It will leave the sidewalk open and we can park in our garages. That makes it a liable project for us. Otherwise, we have to park on the street. And if the streets are all full, which a lot of times are, you can hardly find a parking space. As the rest of neighbors do, they all park on the driveway and on the sidewalk. I'm trying to avoid that. And that's why we're requesting for this minor exception. We just trying to make these viable, usable garages. But unfortunately, the existing conditions doesn't allow us to move any further back. I would have loved to, but we can't. So that's why it will bring us to more of a conformance to what it needs to be. It's right, we don't meet the full code requirement, but it's an extra 8 feet to the top of 15 feet. So you are about 23 feet away from the street curb. So
okay, well, we certainly appreciate the dilemma you're in on this.
Commissioner?
Go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick question for clarification. If I'm understanding your previous comment, your concern was that by approving the MEP, there was the potential opening up for some maybe litigation by proxy of the ADA. Are you any more vulnerable via the city by approving the MEP versus the existing grandfathered condition? I'm just trying to understand when an MEP is granted, What
If they
depth
just do
is for?
if they just do a remodel on the garage, I believe we are not liable for, and they aren't moving the house back. It's a grandfather clause. It's an existing conforming condition, or however we say it. And I don't believe they are the same.
Okay, so I guess the concern you cited earlier about being vulnerable, legally speaking, is under the guise of granting the MEP. There's not some sort of once you grant that, it doesn't sort of state that that condition is now deemed as acceptable, that sort of alleviates some of that issue, or that was your concern?
Well, my concern is, yes, granting an MEP to move it around is the equivalent of a new permit, basically, and we're approving something that does not comply. So
Okay,
that is my concern. But now remember, we're a recommending body here.
right.
The applicant can take this to the planning commission or whoever. Is this going to zoning, Katie, or to planning commission?
No, it'll go to Planning Commission because it also is a cultural heritage permit.
Okay. You can take it with this condition and try to argue it there, but remember that 3 of the members are in front of you tonight.
Sure.
And that should be a good indication of what you would be up against at the next level.
So in Katie's response,
So we're
then,
trying to craft this so you can get an approval easily and quickly.
sure. Okay, so just so I'm clear, because I had thought Katie had responded that whatever was approved, engineering would insist that it be ADA code compliant. So can it be code compliant with the MEP? Is that feasible?
I don't believe so.
Only if
Because
you
I
don't park
I don't believe
in
the
the
courts
driveway.
would. Yeah, I don't think the courts would allow cars to encroach over an ADA pathway.
Okay,
If the streets.
And the fact that the argument that we were given in the packet is the fact they want to park in the driveway. And now that we know that,
I
we-
agree that they want
it's
to.
out of the ADA pathway.
Yeah, I
No,
don't think
no.
they want to. I think right now it's out of absolute necessity. I think by making it a double door garage and more usable and moving it back, it's much less likely that they will. But I think right now it's out of necessity that they park there.
I mean, if we update the garage, there is no need to park in the driveway. So if we can park in there, there is no need to park in the driveway. As I said, I don't like parking my car on the street or on the driveway outside. I prefer it to be inside. And that's the whole point of this. We were just showing to you that I know how many people are going to be there. Then there's not going to be any parking. Anybody who's tenant will be parking in the garages. But if it's not moved, they are going to park outside unless I can severely, I don't know. We have to see what we need to do to open up those garages so they can be usable. That is our dilemma. I mean, I would like to park in the garage. I don't want to park on the street, but that's the only way to get that.
Very
So,
good, we appreciate that. Okay, anything else, or we will close it for public comment. And Katie, do we have any public comment on this item?
I hadn't received any. Let me just double check my email right now just to make sure nothing has come in. No public comment.
Okay, very good. We will open it to discussion then. And Jen and Michael, would you both be willing to comment first on the cultural heritage permit so we can get that behind us? My feeling is that with minor comments that we have today, the cultural heritage permit, I don't believe it affects the cultural resource. Do you have any comments on that item, Michael or Jen?
Yes, I do not believe this poses any negative impact to the historical resource.
Very good. How about you, Michael?
I agree with that.
Okay, well, let's have comment then on the minor exception permit. And either one that you would prefer, go ahead and jump in.
I jump in, Mike, if that's okay. I raised that issue of the making the finding for the minor exception permit. But after some research, and I'm going to change my position today, I believe that I can support it. The reason is, and I also believe that a minor exception permit may not be needed, depending on how we interpret. When I look at the chapter, zoning code chapter 17.22, regarding non-conforming structures, non-conforming structures and uses. And there is a division talking about applicability. So it's 17.72.030 point B regarding exemptions, and then point 2 point lowercase b and lowercase c. So in the bank garage is located in residential zones which do not comply with front yard setback regulations. So my understanding is what it means is that if in the bank garage in residential zones is non-conforming, then this whole chapter is not applicable to it. In other words, we're not going to ask them to make it conforming if they're doing major alteration. Now, with the absence of, with this chapter thrown out, then the rest of the zoning code still apply. One could argue that the zoning requirement for new structure should apply, which would require an MEP if they want to get less than 15. At the same time, one can also argue that this is existing non-conforming. They are doing a major alteration, but they're exempt from the requirement to be conforming. In other words, this is a gray area or vacuum of the regulation about existing non-conforming in the bank garage when people want to modify it. So if it's not clear to me, then I will support an interpretation that in favor of an applicant. And that is because this modification, as long as they keep a small portion of the existing wall, they would not be considered a complete new structure. Therefore, they can keep their non-conforming status, even if it's more than 50% alteration. So if that were true, and they can push it back, even though they're still not pushing back by 15 feet behind the property line, but they're improving it. That goes back to other requirement or the comments that they are reducing the nonconformity and they're improving the front. On that ground, I would say I would support it. So that's my the result of my little research and my new position on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other comments on the building itself before we go and change over to Michael? Not on the building, but on the parking. I would like the applicant to understand, even if I support the new setback at 12 feet behind the property line, I'm not going to support a parking on the driveway. And the planning commission cannot approve this plan with a car showing on the section with a car parking there or on the plan. I understand that this exhibit shows the design intent, and
improve our understanding of that. But eventually, when we approve or not approve it next time, if it goes to planning commission, those cars should be gone, and the condition should be imposed that the applicant will not park on the driveway. With the modification, with the double garage door, two-car garage door, the applicant, as he just stated, they should be able to park in the garage, and also to ensure that the accessible pathway is not blocked by any car parking on the driveway. I take it back. It's not that the applicant should not park on the driveway. They can certainly park a smart car or motorcycle there. Any car should not block the accessible pathway.
You can do that.
That's totally understandable. Yeah.
So that's my
a reasonable request.
Okay, do you have any comment on the freestanding trellis in the back, Jen?
I'm sorry?
I think there was also a patio cover in the back that was in question. And they were saying it had no foundation. Well, if that's the case, it doesn't need a permit either, if it doesn't have a foundation. So
Well, I think the patio cover, if you have a post, you need a foundation, right? The
I
fire
agree.
pit may not need a foundation, but a post needs a foundation.
If I may clarify on that, that was just a representation. We might have sales from the building. That was just a design idea. It's not an important thing. I mean, we haven't even decided. That was just the design process of looking at how we can do something over there. We might just have a
Yeah, there are freestanding trellises that attach to the structure but don't require a foundation. They're like essentially more like a piece of furniture that you purchase, right?
And I think that would be best probably left off the plan, since it's not a permitted item, but it can certainly raise a lot of discussion.
Sure.
Well, yeah, and then it becomes a landscaping and outdoor furniture type of thing.
Sure, we'll remove those.
And as you requested, we will remove the cars from the driveways because, like you said, that was just an exhibit to show. And we have no intention. We want to park our cars in the garages, not on the driveway.
The narrative kind of led me to believe something different than that.
Well,
do that
but that was not the intent. I mean, it's just
We're going to show that the problem.
Yeah, the intent of that exhibit was to, and the letter was trying to say, if we have 4-car garages, why would we want to park on the driveway? And if we have guests, they can park in front of our driveway on the street without blocking the sidewalk.
Okay, Michael, do you have your comments ready?
Yeah, I think it's Commissioner Wu brought up, I thought was an interesting take on that section of our code that applies to non-conforming. And so we've historically looked at that percentage of change to trigger different action on those sorts of uses. But in this case, we're talking about the design and making an exception. I would prefer to see that exception on the interior of the property, though I do appreciate and want the best for every applicant in our community. But I also think about the rest of the community as well. So certainly agree with the parking issue. I mean, if we're going to make adjustments to the structure, let's adjust it so the cars can go inside the structure and off the sidewalk. And then the applicant maybe consider adjusting other parts of the structure so that everything fits. I mean, at this point, may be too much to ask for. So I'll just agree with Commissioner Wu and his position on that and the design of the driveway. A small vehicle perhaps, but and agree with you Mr. Crandall, on the, on the exhibit not reflecting anything, any parking outside of that garage at all. It's just out of the record, and we'd be reviewing and approving something on face value. Okay, so the design, if I didn't mention enough before, I like the lines of this improvement, and I think it looks great. I'm still challenged with the garage doors and how they don't match in size. To me, it throws me off a little bit, but this is the best we're going to get, and there's no other way to do it. Then we'll go with it. I like to see more landscaping. There's not a lot of opportunity for big landscape areas. I understand that, and the property is constrained to some degree. But I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody here, I thought we discussed the some sort of an integrated ground material in the driveways to kind of compensate for the lack of landscaping in other areas. I didn't see that on the revised drawings.
It's on there.
I didn't. Is it on
Yeah,
there?
let me find the page for you.
It's L01, but didn't see that.
Yeah, so L001 has the driveway, like the part that's in the right of way can't probably be turf block. Whatever is the accessible area, I'd have to defer to engineering on that. But you can see the it says permeable paver, turf block, and ground cover.
Oh, okay. The ground cover part I missed. I apologize. Okay. Well, I retract that last.
And I believe they have that note on a couple other locations on various sheets. But they could clarify that if it's not clear.
Okay. Now, is there irrigation being included in this design? Or how's it going to be irrigated?
I don't think that there's irrigation with the turf block. Typically, you just have to pick something resilient. I don't know how you'd run the irrigation under turf block where you're going to be driving. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's possible. Maybe the architect knows.
Yeah, you could do you can. It's doable.
Yeah, there's an underground system. There are perforated lines that can be hooked up to a timer that just seep from underneath as opposed to over water head.
Okay. And I apologize for not bringing this up when we were discussing this with the applicant earlier, but would it be okay to ask for that at this point? Bart, how do you feel about recommending that be considered at least so that we can ensure the longevity of the plant material in the front?
I think we could certainly put it as a wish list for the applicant to take a look at, and then the final decision for that would be made at commission level.
Later
So
on.
I think it's certainly right to give your opinion that would be a good add for the applicant.
Okay. Well, then let it be an opinion to add.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Other than that, I think I am relatively comfortable with the project, and unless something else comes up, and I'll let you know, I'll just conclude my comments at this point.
Very good. I'll give my opinion on it. Aesthetically, I'm comfortable with the project. I always have been with the look and all. I'm hung up on this liability issue. So my opinion is at design review, I think it sounds like everyone's pretty comfortable with it at design review level. Could I support it at the planning commission level? Would totally depend on what the city attorney and code enforcement and the building official gives us as an interpretation of the liability that we put the city in for not addressing ADA issues if we allow a full rebuild of the garage. So I'm thinking that with the comments on the architecture and the style, that the conditional cultural heritage permit is acceptable, that I'm not sure we can go much further at design review than we have. And I think Katie's got her work to do with code enforcement, Adam, knowing that could they even support getting the tickets out on people parking over the ADA. And if they do, that's where the liability comes in. If we can't support, if we can't enforce it, then we shouldn't do it. And I'm going to have to be convinced at the commission level on that issue. But that doesn't mean you can't say, we'll leave it where it is. That would be acceptable. I think that it is grandfathered in. I'd like, I don't know who the individual would be since we don't have a city planner right at the moment, but make a decision also on Jen's interpretation of the zoning ordinance. So I'd be willing to say, move it along. And this might just be one of those ones that we have to deal with at the commission level. And the arguments I've heard so far from the applicant really tend towards what the argument would be for a lose the name of it anyway, a variance to the code, but that's not what we're doing, and I think it would have trouble with the ADA going that way. So what do you think about that approach, Michael and Jen, that we move it along and realizing that we've got a pretty intense commission discussion that we'll have, but I don't see how we can eliminate.
Yeah, I would support it to go to the planning commission. At the same time, I agree with you that the staff needs to do a little more research, because I just threw an idea out there. I believe there is a room that can be, a case can be made that MEP is not needed, but it depends on the staff's more extensive research and consulting with the city attorney, because it has a potential to establish a precedence, right? So it could be a formal interpretation type of thing that is needed. And also, Bart, I want to make sure that to address your ADA concern, because I'm always for the ADA accessible pathway. The curb to property line right now is about 9 or maybe 10 feet. And that's wide enough to accommodate not only the driveway cut, but also the sidewalk up and around, well, really not up, but around the driveway cut. Katie, can you confirm that?
It might have a bit of a side slope to it, but yes.
When I asked Zach Ponson about that, he said he wouldn't be able to tell until it's actually designed, just because of some of the slopes. But at 10 feet, it is pretty wide. So very likely they wouldn't need to go past the property line for the accessible pathway.
Okay, and even if it needs to get into the property, and then there's easement dedication would be required, because there's a 12 feet setback there, and the parking is, if the city needs that easement, would demand that easement.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the applicant, I think some backup information has to be prepared for us. And I will make the comment that you may see new commissioners when it gets up there, because appointments are coming up on June 1st, and we don't know what the makeup of the commission will be, but that's
July
don't be
1st.
surprised to see that. So it looks like we're in agreement. Move it ahead. Is it Heidi? You still there? The architect?
Yes, I'm here.
I would suggest for that meeting to have prepared just one document that you could pull out with the garage at its existing location, just in your hip pocket as a fallback on if we need it.
Essentially meaning if we kind of plead our case and it doesn't come back in our favor, we sort of have the alternative ready to go.
I think that might be helpful.
Okay, understood.
Okay, well, congratulations on moving it along. We're here to help you out, and we're trying to avoid any pitfalls, and I think we've avoided as many as we can at this level. So I'll move it on. And Katie, thank you very much for your report, and you certainly listened to the comments and prepared a comprehensive report. And I think on face value, I think your recommendations and all were correct, etc. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Stephanie, happy birthday. I hope you didn't
Thank you very
miss
much.
your dinner.
No, it's later on. I'm still
Okay,
here
good.
until 5:30.
Okay. So we will close that item. I'm going back to agenda. So the next item would be new business, which we have none. Old business, I just want to thank Jen and Michael for a good couple years here. And I think we did our job, and it's been a pleasure working with you guys. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to do so in the future. So thanks to both staff and commissioners.
Well, but we have two more design review meetings in June, right? At least.
Well, the applications are accepted on the 8th, or the interviews, June 8th. And I believe the
Oh.
next meeting is the installment.
Right.
So
Okay.
Maybe I
Yeah.
should clarify. My understanding in speaking with Cecilia Gallardo Daly, our community development director, is that these terms do last through the end of the fiscal year. And so it's very similar to the normal planning commission appointments. So it usually follows along the fiscal year schedule, so that we expect that this design review subcommittee would be still meeting together for the duration of June as well.
wonderful. Well, seeing as everything's going smoothly with this process, let's hope so. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll close old business, oral and written communications. I have seen none. Stephanie or Katie, are there any?
No, we have not received any additional public comments.
Okay, the last item is adjournment. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
move to adjourn
Go ahead, Jen.
Well,
our regular meeting of the design review subcommittee until Wednesday, June 9th, 2021 at 4 p.m. via teleconference.
Do we have a second?
you have a second, and happy birthday to Stephanie. Hope it's a great year for
Okay,
you.
we have a motion by Jen, second by Commissioner Blackwell. We'll take a head count. Commissioner Blackwell,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
and Commissioner Crandall is an aye. So the meeting is adjourned, and congratulations to the applicant on